All right, let's get into this. We're about to unpack one of the most foundational stories ever told. Now, on the surface, it seems simple enough, right? It's about a miraculous birth to a really old couple. But if you look just a little closer, you see it's this incredible literary masterpiece, just packed with family drama, human failure, and a divine promise that sounds almost too big to be true. Everything kicks off with this absolutely breathtaking promise. God tells a man named Abraham, who has no children, to look up at the night sky and try to count the stars. That, God says, is how many descendants you're going to have. It's a beautiful, poetic image. But for Abraham and his wife Sarah, who were way past their childbearing years, it must have felt completely impossible. So here's our roadmap for digging into this amazing story. We're going to start with that impossible promise. Then we'll look at the very human attempt to help God out. After that, we'll see the joy when the promise finally comes true. Then we'll dive into a shocking parallel between Abraham's two sons. And finally, we'll look at the legacy that unfolds from all of it. Okay, first up, an impossible promise. The whole story really hangs on this one central problem. God has promised this massive legacy, but the clock is ticking loudly. And this timeline, wow. This really puts their weight into perspective. This isn't something that just happens overnight. We're talking about a 25-year gap between the promise of an heir and the actual birth of Isaac. I mean, can you imagine waiting a quarter of a century for something you were promised? That is a lifetime of wrestling with doubt and trying to hang on to hope. And the text does not pull any punches about the biological reality here. The language it uses is just stark. Abraham is pushing 100, and Sarah's womb is literally described as good as dead. So this isn't just a tough situation from any human perspective, it's just plain impossible. The story is setting us up for a miracle of epic proportions. So after about a decade of waiting, you can feel the patience wearing thin. And this leads to a huge turning point in the story, where Abraham and Sarah basically decide, okay, God's timing is a little slow, let's take matters into our own hands. You can almost hear the desperation in Sarah's voice. She comes up with a plan, one that was actually pretty common in that culture, and she offers her Egyptian slave girl, Hagar, to Abraham to have a child for them. Her words are so telling. She says she wants to be built up. She is desperate to build the family that God promised. And this is where the literary genius just pops off the page. The author uses very specific Hebrew words and phrases to tell this part of the story. When it says Abraham listened to the voice of Sarai, and that Sarai took Hagar and gave him to him, it is an exact word-for-word echo of the fall in the Garden of Eden, where Adam listened to Eve's voice and she took the fruit and gave it to him. That parallel is a giant, flashing sign for the reader, basically screaming, this human solution is a replay of that first big mistake. So, does the plan work? Well, kind of. Ishmael is born, Abraham has a son, but it doesn't bring the resolution they wanted, not at all. Instead, it unleashes all this jealousy and conflict into the family, creating a rival heir and causing so much pain for everyone, especially for Hagar. The human solution just created a very human and very messy problem. But the story doesn't end there in that mess. 14 years go by, God steps in directly, and the whole tone of the story shifts from human trying to divine fulfillment. And the key to this whole section, believe it or not, is in a name. When the promised son is finally born, they name him Isaac, or Yitzchak in Hebrew, which literally means laughter. And this is not just some random name, it's a theme that's been carefully woven through the entire story. In fact, we see 3 totally different kinds of laughter. First, you get Abraham's laugh. It's a laugh of pure disbelief when God tells him he's going to be a dad at 99. Then you get Sarah's laugh. It's a secret, cynical laugh of doubt when she overhears the same crazy promise. But that third laugh, that's the one that changes everything. After Isaac is born, Sarah exclaims with pure joy, God has made laughter for me. The meaning is totally transformed, from the bitter laugh of doubt to the pure, joyful laugh of a promise fulfilled. And just to let the scale of this moment hit you, Abraham was 100 years old, a full century of life before he got to hold the son God had promised him 25 years earlier. The wait was finally over. But here's the thing. The joy of Isaac's birth immediately sparks a brand new crisis. This family is not big enough for 2 rival heirs. And what happens next is one of the most brilliantly constructed and just emotionally gutting parts of the entire story. So, let's look closely at the language here, because the author is doing something amazing. After Isaac is weaned, Sarah demands that Hagar and Ishmael be sent away. And the text says Abraham rose early to send his first son, Ishmael, out into the wilderness. Now get this. The very next story, the famous one about the binding of Isaac, begins with the exact same Hebrew phrase. Abraham rose early to take his second son, Isaac, up a mountain. The parallel is impossible to miss. It's completely intentional. And it keeps going. Out in the desert, a devastated Hagar places her dying son Ishmael under a bush. Up on the mountain, God provides a ram to be sacrificed in place of Isaac. And in Hebrew, it's the very same word, tahat, used in both places. The author is connecting these two moments, telling us that both of Abraham's sons are brought right to the edge of death. And in both stories, the rescue comes from the exact same place. An angel calls down from the heavens to save Ishmael, and an angel calls down from the heavens to save Isaac. Do you see it? The author has designed these two stories as a matched set. He's showing us that this isn't just a story about Isaac, it's a story about Abraham losing both his sons, one right after the other, and about God miraculously saving them both. So all of this brings us to the resolution. How does this incredibly painful, complicated family drama wrap up? Well, it's not with a simple happily ever after. It's with the beginning of two separate, divinely guided destinies. God makes it really clear that the special covenant promise is going to continue through Isaac's line. But, and this is so important, that doesn't mean Ishmael is just cast aside or forgotten. Not at all. God explicitly promises to bless Ishmael too, promising to make him into his own great nation and the father of 12 princes. Both sons get a divine promise for their future. So the story resolves with this really complex reality. It's not a simple picture of one chosen son and one rejected one. Instead, it shows how, from this one father, through a journey full of faith and failure and divine rescue, two powerful family lines are born, each with its own promise from God. And that leaves us with a final thought to chew on. This ancient story, with its incredible literary structure and its raw, honest human emotion, it really forces us to ask some big questions. How do divine promises get tangled up with our very human choices and mistakes? How does conflict end up shaping our destiny? And what does it mean for one family's story to become the origin point for entire nations? It's a story that has been echoing through history ever since.